The summer I lost my entire brassica crop in 11 days changed everything I thought I knew about pest control. I had 40 plants, Brussels sprouts, kale, broccoli, all coming along beautifully. And then I noticed the first cabbage white butterfly on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, there were caterpillars on every single plant. And by the following weekend, I was standing in a garden full of lacework leaves and hollow stems with nothing to show for 3 months of work. I spent the next 2 weeks spraying neem oil every 3 days, hand-picking caterpillars at dusk, and covering what was left with insect netting. It worked well enough to save 10 plants, but what I was doing was reactive. I was fighting a battle I had already lost. In that winter, I read something in John Seymour's The New Self-Sufficient Gardener that stopped me cold. He wrote that a garden designed around natural pest resistance does not fight pests. It prevents them from arriving in the first place. And the difference between those two approaches is the difference between a gardener who spends every summer in crisis mode and a gardener who harvests clean, healthy vegetables season after season without touching a single spray bottle. That was the year I stopped fighting pests and started designing against them. And the system that came out of that shift is what I am going to show you today. The three-plant barrier system is not companion planting in the loose, hope-it-helps sense that most gardening books describe. It is a deliberately structured perimeter of 3 specific plants placed at 3 specific positions around the garden that works through 3 completely different mechanisms: repellence, confusion, and trap cropping. And when you run all 3 mechanisms simultaneously, the effect is not additive. It is exponential. Because pests that push through the first barrier encounter the second, and the ones that get past the second get pulled away from your crops by the third. This is not a spray. This is not a product. This is a designed biological system that runs itself once you plant it. And it costs almost nothing after the first year, because 2 of the 3 plants are perennials that come back on their own, and the third self-seeds so freely that you will never need to buy another packet. Plant 1 is wormwood, Artemisia absinthium. And wormwood is the backbone of this entire system because it works through one of the most powerful mechanisms in the plant kingdom: volatile chemical emission. Wormwood releases aromatic compounds continuously from its leaves and stems. And those compounds are not just unpleasant to pests. They interfere with the ability of aphids, cabbage moths, flea beetles, and carrot flies to locate their host plants at all. The smell of wormwood overwhelms the chemical signals that these pests use to navigate. It is not that they dislike your garden. It is that they cannot find it. You plant wormwood as a perimeter plant along the windward edge of your garden. Whichever direction the prevailing wind comes from in your area, that is where the wormwood goes. And the reason for this placement is that the volatile compounds need to drift across the garden on the breeze to create what I call the confusion zone, a belt of disrupted chemical signals that begins before a pest even reaches your crops. Plant wormwood 3 feet apart in a single row along that windward edge. It grows to about 4 feet tall and spreads slowly, so you will need to divide it every 3 years to keep it from getting woody and losing its potency. And the most important thing to know about wormwood is that it is allelopathic, which means it releases compounds through its roots that suppress the growth of other plants nearby. So never plant it directly next to vegetables. The perimeter placement keeps it at a safe distance from your crops while still allowing its airborne compounds to do their work across the entire garden. Plant 2 is nasturtiums. And nasturtiums are the most misunderstood plant in companion planting because most people grow them for their flowers and treat the pest benefits as a bonus. But in the 3-plant barrier system, nasturtiums serve as the trap crop. And a trap crop is not a plant that repels pests. It is a plant that attracts them so powerfully that pests choose it over your vegetables. Aphids, in particular, will colonize a nasturtium plant in preference to almost any vegetable in the garden. And this is the key insight. You are not hoping that aphids will not arrive. You are accepting that they will arrive and giving them a destination that is not your crops. You plant nasturtiums in clusters of 5 to 7 plants at the corners of your growing beds and at any gaps in the perimeter. And then you do something that feels deeply counterintuitive. You let the aphids come. You let them colonize the nasturtiums. And then, once a colony has built up fully, you pull the entire nasturtium plant out, aphids and all, and compost it far from the garden. Then you replace it with a fresh transplant that will repeat the cycle. This is the trap crop rotation. And it is more effective than any spray because you are removing the pest population physically from the garden rather than simply killing individual insects. A plant pulled out with 2,000 aphids on it is 2,000 aphids that will never produce the next generation on your kale. Nasturtiums also produce a compound called glucotropaeolin from their roots that is toxic to certain soil-borne pests, particularly the larvae of vine weevils. So while the above-ground trap crop mechanism is pulling flying pests away from your vegetables, the root chemistry is working below ground to suppress a completely different category of pest. Two mechanisms, one plant. And because nasturtiums self-seed prolifically, once you have them established, you will never need to buy seed again. Plant 3 is Tansy, and Tansy is the structural layer of the system. It is a tall, vigorous, strongly aromatic perennial that repels a specific range of pests that wormwood does not effectively target. In particular, Tansy repels ants, squash bugs, Colorado potato beetles, Japanese beetles, and the flies that cause root maggot damage in brassicas. And the ant connection matters more than most gardeners realize. Ants are the often invisible driver of aphid infestations in the garden. Ants farm aphids. They carry aphid eggs to new plants, protect aphid colonies from predators like ladybirds, and harvest the honeydew that aphids produce. A garden with a large ant population will always have worse aphid pressure than a garden where the ants are disrupted. Tansy disrupts the ants before they can establish their aphid farms. And when you combine Tansy's ant deterrence with the nasturtium trap crop, you are attacking the aphid problem from two completely different angles at once. You plant Tansy on the leeward side of the garden, directly opposite the wormwood, so that the two aromatic perimeter plants bracket your growing beds from both sides. Tansy grows to 4 feet and spreads aggressively by root, so like wormwood, it needs to be divided regularly and kept at a respectful distance from vegetables. Plant it no closer than 3 feet from the edge of your nearest growing bed. And here is where the system becomes something greater than the sum of its parts. Wormwood on the windward edge creates the confusion zone. Tansy on the leeward edge creates a second chemical barrier. Nasturtiums planted inside the perimeter act as the internal trap crop and interception layer. A pest that navigates through the wormwood confusion zone and crosses the garden encounters the nasturtiums first. And the nasturtiums pull them away from the brassicas, the beans, the squash, and the tomatoes you are actually trying to protect. The 3 plants form a triangle of influence: confusion, then interception, then biological removal. And each mechanism targets different pests through different pathways, which is why this system provides broad-spectrum protection rather than the narrow protection of a single companion plant or a single spray. Now let me walk you through exactly how to install this system this season. In early spring, 4 weeks before your last frost date, direct sow nasturtium seeds into the positions you have identified at the corners and gaps of your beds. Nasturtiums germinate in 10 to 14 days and grow quickly. They need full sun and poor soil. Rich soil makes them produce leaves instead of flowers, and it is the flowers that attract pests most powerfully. So do not add compost to their planting positions. Let them grow lean and they will flower prolifically all season long. Wormwood and Tansy are both perennials, so you plant them once and they come back every year. If you are starting from scratch, buy 2 wormwood plants and 2 Tansy plants from a herb nursery, or divide them from a neighbor who already grows them. Plant them in their perimeter positions in early spring and they will establish through the first season, reaching their full effectiveness in year 2. In year 1, they will still provide partial benefit and the nasturtiums will carry most of the load. By year 2, the perimeter is fully operational. Wormwood and Tansy are at full size and full potency. Nasturtiums are grown from saved seed that costs you nothing. And the system is running on its own without any input from you beyond pulling a nasturtium every few weeks when it fills with aphids and replacing it with a fresh plant. This is the point where most gardeners notice something that surprises them. It is not that there are no pests in the garden. It is that the pests are on the nasturtiums instead of the crops. And when you pull a nasturtium heavy with aphids and replace it with a clean seedling, you feel the system working in your hands. You are not spraying. You are harvesting pests. And in the beds themselves, the brassicas have no caterpillar damage. The beans have no aphid colonies. The potatoes have no beetle pressure. Not because the garden is sterile and lifeless, but because the system is guiding pest behavior away from what you need to protect and toward what you are willing to sacrifice. This is the difference between reactive pest management and design pest prevention. One costs you time, money, and crop losses every single season. The other costs you the price of a few plants in the first year and then runs itself for decades. The three-plant barrier system. Wormwood on the windward edge to create the confusion zone that stops pests from finding your crops in the first place. Tansy on the leeward edge to repel ants and beetles and break the chain that drives aphid infestations. Nasturtiums inside the perimeter to intercept, attract, and physically remove the pests that make it through. 3 plants, 3 mechanisms, one design system that protects your garden season after season without chemicals, without sprays, and without the desperate, exhausting crisis management that most gardeners spend their entire summer trapped in. Plant the perimeter this spring. Pull the nasturtiums when they fill with aphids. Divide the wormwood and tansy every 3 years to keep them potent, and then step back and let the system work. Because in gardening, the goal is never to fight harder. The goal is to design better. And a garden that protects itself is worth 10 times more than a garden you have to defend every single day. Stop spraying. Start designing. The pests do not win when you build the system correctly. They just go somewhere else.